Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second session of the Tomorrow's Leaders Professional Development Series. Tonight's session, Resources to Maximize Your Career Planning, where we hope you will leave here with some new tips and tricks for job hunting and navigating the world that is career planning, and maybe with some new goals for your personal and professional journeys. My name is Harris Markowitz, and I'll be your moderator this evening. A little about me. I serve as the chairperson for the National Tomorrow's Leaders Committee. I was previously chair of the Greater New York's Tomorrow's Leaders chapter and currently an active member of the Greater New York chapter for the last 15 years and a board member for both the Greater New York chapter as well as the Greater New Jersey chapter. And during my day, I'm actually a senior vice president at Clarion Partners within their asset management group, where I oversee the major sectors, including office, life science, industrial, retail, and their mezz debt, as well as serve in evaluation capacity. I want to thank each of you this evening for not only taking the time to join us, but for all you do to support the Tomorrow's Leaders program across the country. Now, I'm excited to introduce you to our speakers today. I'll let them tell you more about themselves. But first, let me introduce you to Don Alexander and Julie Dunn Eichenberg. Don, I'll let Don speak for himself.
I guess I first got to unmute to do that. Can you hear me okay, Harris?
Yes.
Excellent. So basically, I'm an executive recruiter in the life sciences industry, and I've been doing this work for a little over 20 years now. I think when you get to 20 years, you can stop at that point and say that's enough years. I've worked on a variety of different positions in the life sciences industry. One might say at one point or another, we filled virtually every position type functionally that there is in a modern day biotechnology company. And prior to my work in life sciences recruiting, I used to work in the financial services industry for Bank of America and Shearson Lehman Brothers back in the day, and managed many millions of dollars in assets at that earlier on in my career. So that's me, and happy to be here and part of the discussion tonight.
Thank you. And let me allow Julie to introduce herself as well.
Oh, well, thank you so much. My name is Julie Eichenberg, and I am currently the Chief Revenue Officer for Fan Data Insights, where I lead our sales and business development efforts for a data analytics platform that focuses specifically on helping collegiate athletic programs fundraise more effectively. And I spent 22 years of my career at Turner Broadcasting, which is now known as Warner Brothers Discovery. It went through a variety of owners over those 22 years and since. But mostly my role was focused on sales and marketing and working with multi-million-dollar accounts in the US and Canada. And I've been both a professional and volunteer fundraiser for my entire career. I've worked with the Florida State University Foundation, the Gamma Phi Beta Foundation, and most currently, I am the chair of the Georgia chapter of the CF Foundation. So that is where my passion lies, and in helping others fundraise for causes that I believe in. So, and I, like Don, am very excited to be here, and am looking forward to sharing an hour with all of you.
Well, thank you to both of you. I really appreciate, I speak on behalf of all of Tomorrow's Leaders, of thanking you both for spending the hour with us this evening. It's people like you that dedicate your time that help make this program as successful as it is. For everyone that's joining us, you've seen me talk at several of these right now, and I enjoy them to be engaging. We want you to, I really mean it when I say I want you to walk away feeling like you're able to now go back to your workplace and actually apply, several of the items that Don and Julie will be talking about. So please, if you're comfortable, please engage in the chat, turn on your camera, and if you'd like to ask a question directly, you can use your raise your hand function, and we'll call on you to unmute. A few other housekeeping notes before we begin. Um, we do have your mics muted for this portion of the program to cut down on the background noise. We welcome you to introduce yourself in the chat, share your name and where you're joining from. And again, feel free to submit questions through the chat box throughout the conversation, and we'll be sure to come back to them. So with that, let us get started. You know, I know Julie, you noted a little bit about your CF connection, but maybe if you can tell us a little bit more about how you got involved with the foundation.
Absolutely. So I learned about CF in 1988 when my nephew Matthew was born and diagnosed at 3 months old. And so immediately my family, including Matt's mom and dad, my brother and sister-in-law, became very involved with the foundation. And mostly at that point, our focus was really on Great Strides. They were responsible for hosting multiple Great Strides events throughout Central Florida. Once I moved to Atlanta, which is where I live now, in 1995, I got involved locally with Great Strides, and then ultimately with our Wine and Roses Gala event, which I chaired with my husband for 3 years. And then also got involved with the board and on the National Leadership Council, working with the Corporate Engagement Committee, which is also where I know Don from. And so I'm very pleased to continue the work with the CF Foundation in a variety of different roles. And it's given me an opportunity to really meet some tremendous people and learn about tremendous stories, and obviously be a part of all of the incredible research that has come about, especially over the last couple of years. Don, I'll turn it over to you.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Julie. Yeah, Julie and I got to know each other, she mentioned, with the Corporate Engagement Committee, which is a committee that works at the national level to help ideate, I suppose, around major contributors to the foundation. Many of the marquee corporations that have been strong supporters over many, many years. And I got my background, actually, I don't have a familial connection, actually, with CF. Kay James, our Senate Director and the Central to Eastern North Carolina chapter, and for definition, that stretches, if you're familiar with North Carolina topography, from about Greensboro, Winston-Salem, through the area that I'm in the Research Triangle, Raleigh-Durham area of North Carolina, through to the coast in Wilmington, is the geographic footprint. But it was about 10 or 12 years ago, she was forming what was to become the Corporate Advisory Committee, which was seen as a way at the time to help the CF Foundation encourage fundraising among corporations, really to encourage corporate philanthropy as a larger component, if you will, of the overall fundraising effort. And I met her, at one of the events, and she recruited me in. And I quickly developed a passion for the foundation itself, and really was driven by the patient experiences, the patient stories, the fact that the foundation was, quite frankly, so successful in its drug development efforts. Kalydeco, I think, was just about to be approved, if I recall at the time, or it may have just been approved. But anyway, it was just a fascinating group. And, obviously we recruit in the drug development industry. So I was like, why not? Let's see what happens here. And a few years later, she asked me to lead our board, what Julie's doing for the Central Eastern North Carolina chapter. And I've just been active with the chapter in various fundraising capacities ever since. So it's been a great ride. I really, love the different aspects of the foundation that I've been a part of, everything from advocacy to, visiting the patient care centers. It's really been a great experience. So happy to be involved.
That's really great. And we're happy that you are both involved. So now pivoting a little bit back to, your professional career, why don't you tell us a little bit about, your current job? Well, give us a little bit of a background as to where you work, but why don't you tell us a little bit about what your day-to-day looks like? So why don't we, let me start off with Don.
Yeah, so I started Genecoda after exiting my former firm about 5 years ago. So I basically run an executive search firm that's focused solely on the placement of US-based life sciences placements. And as I had mentioned, Harris, we focus on a wide swath of different technologies in the industry, which have in fact included CF in the past. And so we've placed various functional positions and disciplines. And my day-to-day involves various client meetings, prospect marketing, of course, candidate outreach and interviewing for various search assignments that we're working on. And lately, as a result of some of the goings on in the industry in regards to reductions in force and whatnot, just really trying to help those that may have been impacted by some of those industry downsizings, if you will. We've all read about some of those things out there in the press, and it is true that some companies are cutting back these days.
As someone that works in real estate with life science, we definitely are starting to see the impact. So it's the party it has ended. It feels very much so, and hopefully we get to a point at least of raising a cocktail down in in the near future. Though definitely still a stronger sector compared to others that we've seen. So Julie, why don't you share a little bit about your current position, specifically speaking to what it's like to be at a startup company?
Well, it's definitely different, having worked in corporate America for most of my career. I mentioned that I was at Turner Broadcasting for over 20 years, which included at least 3 mergers and acquisitions that I survived. And I kind of always joked that, layoffs are it kind of feels like a game of musical chairs where at some point there's not a chair for you, and it has nothing to do really with your performance or what's happening. It's just kind of a part of the overall game that's happening. And so it was my time to not have a chair in the end of 2019. And so the benefit of being with a company for a long time is they give you a long runway to figure out what your next step is. And I used that to I decided to go back and get my MBA. And so I started that process. And also keep in mind, within a couple of months, we were in the midst of COVID. So it ended up being a very strange time. But I used that time to really explore what I wanted to do. And I mentioned that I've been a volunteer fundraiser for most of my life. And so I decided that I really wanted to explore opportunities in nonprofit and in fundraising. And so I worked for a period of time, actually for my alma mater, Florida State, as a fundraiser, and having a friend who also was a Seminole who was in the midst of kind of starting a data analytics company, working in collegiate athletics, focused on fundraising. He and I had many conversations. And so I decided to take the leap and kind of get into business with him. And we are essentially building a startup business and focused on those D1 programs throughout the country and potentially, even going broader than that. But it's not for the faint of heart, I'll tell you that. And it's a big change from corporate America and being in an office 5 days a week. I now work from home, and I can effectively work in my sweatpants some days if I want to. But it also is when you're in a startup, it means that you're doing everything from sending out the emails and correspondence, building the marketing pieces, and taking out the trash. So you got to be prepared to do all of it, which is a good thing. Eyes wide open. So it's great.
But what I find amazing with that, right, is I'm going to ask a follow-up, right? Do you think if you weren't laid off from Warner, do you think you'd still be there, and do you think you'd be as happy, or are you happy today?
Oh, well, I'm definitely happy today. And that's a little unique in the sense that no one that I worked with previously, I mean, maybe 1 or 2 individuals out of, thousands of employees are still there. It's gone through so many turnovers and transformations. And so it's a little different. I was driving through downtown Atlanta today and thought Wow, it was a great part of my life. I got great things out of it. But it was time for me to do something different. And so it created that opportunity, which I feel like I've seized that opportunity, and that's
Yep.
what you have to do. I mean, sometimes you don't get the choice as to whether or not the next step is placed in front of you, but what you can do is kind of just keep moving forward.
No,
And it's been a good thing.
I was gonna say I agree with that because I work with people, and sometimes people become too comfortable at work. And I'm sure Don hears this from people that he talks to. They get too comfortable, and they think that they either have to get promoted within their firm or they're kind of stuck. And I'm always advocating that maybe it is time to interview or look elsewhere. And you never know, you're going to interview and find that you're actually really happy where you are, right? Or you're going to interview and be like, holy shit, I'm actually not happy. And I didn't even realize I wasn't happy. I didn't think that there was a world outside of where I've been working the last 5, 10, 15 years. So, I think it's great that you were able to take lemons and make lemonade, or hopefully, something better than more like a limoncello, as it
I think
sounds. So,
limoncello for sure.
so with that, Don, I think I speak for everyone when I ask this question. As a recruiter, what's some advice you have for those of us that are seeking new opportunities or potentially seeking new opportunities?
Yeah, so there's a few things that go along with that. The, when we think about seeking new job opportunities, a lot of times we think about networking, and networking really needs to occur on a holistic basis at all times. A network isn't a one-time thing. It's continuous nurturing. And so it's more than just, I guess, making a LinkedIn connection. You want to begin a network. You want to continue to build that network, grow that network, and nurture that network. And I think it's important to understand that networking is not easy for a lot of people. It's really not. But it's also important understanding that networking, and we've got dynamic statistics around this, it really delivers about 60% of all hires, in the industry. So it's mandatory. And we have to find ways to get out of our comfort zone, if you will. And so one of the books that I read that I think is the best book that I've ever read personally on networking is a book by author Heather Hollick called Helpful. And I would tell you that it's an absolute must read. And I'm not being paid by Heather, so I don't get any bonuses for recommending her book. But without stealing her thunder in terms of the book itself, which you should read if you haven't already, a couple of the key frameworks she poses are: when you're introducing yourself to someone, her key statement is, what are you working on? So I found myself, it was really interesting. If you think about when you just go up to I go up to Julie at a networking event, I used to say, what brings you here? Or a lot of people will say to me, what does Genecoda do? I was at a networking event today. I said, what does Genecoda do? A lot of people say things like that. Tell me about yourself. But Heather advocates, what are you working on, as the opening statement. And then what she's constantly thinking about in the book is, how can I help you? I'm not concentrating. I think that's really important. The key is, the focus is how I can help you, not how you can help me. Okay. And I'd like to repeat that. The focus of a networking exercise is how I can help Julie, not how Julie can help me. Okay. So I think that's really important. The other aspect that I'll just throw in there, we get asked a lot about when talking about career progression and networking, is the idea of, I've been asked several times, what does it take to be a CEO of a biotech company? And I'll just smile at that question, because I think the easiest thing to do is actually look at the resume of someone who's, or maybe 10 resumes of people that have achieved that position, and break them down and see what steps they took to get to that level. And I've actually done this before. It's really interesting. There are various building blocks, and it's not a linear path in most cases. A lot of people, at least that are what I'm going to call commercial CEOs. I'm not necessarily talking about someone who just went out, maybe they graduated from a top-notch school like Stanford and just started as a CEO of their own company, but a commercial CEO that's running a company. You see patterns, but it's not always a linear pattern, but they've developed skill sets. So maybe they were a top scientist, but they had to learn about finance. They had to understand what a cap table actually was, or they had to interact with the investment community. They had to polish and hone their business skills. So they had to do other things along that path, along that way, and get in various job opportunities that would give them the opportunity to continue to develop those skills. Of course, volunteerism being one of those. So that's something else I wanted to mention as far as that goes. Julie, to you.
Well, I mean, you're so right in when you say that it's not a linear path. I don't think it's a linear path for 95% of the people out there. Those that have a linear path, I'm kind of surprised, but in most cases, you are having to learn a different skill or to move yourself out of a situation or into a better situation where there is more room for growth and opportunity. And I was kind of surprised at your statistic. I hadn't heard you say that before, Dawn, that 60% come from networking. I would think it's more, because I know in my own job search process that LinkedIn, applying to a job on LinkedIn or on Indeed or any of those sites is virtually a black hole. So, my recommendation would be, yes, absolutely network and build the network well in advance of when you need it. And certainly if you can provide that help to somebody else in advance of when you're going to need it, then it will be repaid to you. So I spent many, many years at Turner being kind of the internal source who would scope out the role if someone was looking to get into the organization, scope out the role, make the connection with the hiring manager and the recruiter so that they had an introduction. And I would suggest you do the same thing. If you're looking at a role, find out who that knows someone on the inside who can get your resume in front of the right person, and then reach out. And I think people are happy to help if they're given specific instructions or a specific ask. So, hey, can you help me with my job search is a little too broad for anybody to really step in and help. But hey, Dawn, I'm looking at this role. I see that you're connected to John Smith. Would you mind making an introduction to John Smith, or would you mind sharing my resume with John Smith so that I can hopefully get an interview with that individual? And most people will do that. And I would also say, follow up with John to say, thank you. I reached out to John and I had the interview and now I'm waiting to hear back. Or, hey, great news. I've moved on to the second round of interviews, or whatever it is. I think, people are happy to help, but they also want to feel like their help is acknowledged in some way. And that's an easy way to do it. You don't necessarily, I think it's nice. I send a lot of thank you notes, but you don't necessarily have to send a handwritten thank you note for it, but at least acknowledge and respect that they spent their time to put you in touch with the right person, and likely they would do it again if they could. So those are the only other things I would kind of add to Don's words of wisdom, because it's not an easy process. And so be patient with yourself, but also really, reach out to people and ask with a specific ask. And I think you'll get a great response.
I agree with that. It's crazy how fast the world has changed when going back, 10 years ago when I was in the process of switching jobs, that's how you did find jobs, is through LinkedIn and Indeed, because they were relatively new platforms. And now it's like, to your point, it feels like we're going back to being old school a bit, where it actually needs to be more of that face-to-face interaction to be able to stand out from the rest of the crowd. So to that same end, Julie Eisen had a question to a follow-up, which is, what kind of things can we as young professionals offer to people we want to network with?
Well,
what would you say are some tips and tricks with that?
I mean, as a young professional, you have conceivably more time on your hands, right? So you may not yet have a family and other responsibilities. So you can participate and engage in evening events where at some point in your career, you may not be able to do that. And so you can be the doer. And that's often how I got involved and kind of moved up in volunteer organizations, was because I was happy to roll up my sleeves and do the work. And I had the time to do it. And I'm pretty good at being a doer. So I would volunteer to, take on that report or lead the this new initiative. And it caught the attention of some of the leaders of the organization who are more seasoned professionals, who said, I know if I give a project to Julie, she's going to do it, and she'll do it well. And she'll, provide kind of a summary report at the end. And so I built that kind of reputation with them, and it then allowed them to know if they were recommending me to a professional company or organization or for a position, that they could put their faith in that I would do a good job. So they had already witnessed that behavior. So I think that's the best angle you can take in using some of these volunteer activities to really move the needle in your professional career and build that credibility for yourself and with others who have maybe more experience and more, years under their belt than you may have.
And I would just add what value, and I think Julie's really touched on this, and Harris has, but that value, what value, so you're questioning, what value can I offer the other individual? That it's back to Heather's statement. How can I help? In some cases, the answer is I might not be able to, and that's okay. But this is interesting. I get, as a recruiter, and in full and fair disclosure, our clients pay us to find people. Candidates do not pay us to get job placement. So that's how our operating universe works. But I get a lot of LinkedIn messages and email requests because I've been doing this for a long time. And I just like to present a tale of two LinkedIn messages from people that I've never been in contact before, to see what I'd like to ask you is to think about both of these messages, and to think about which one that you would most likely respond to, or be most likely to take time with. Okay, all else equal. Hi, Don, I was let go from my company last week and wanted to see if you could help me find a new job. Choice 2. Hi, Don, I was let go from my company last week and I'm seeking a new job. I recognize that you may not have a present assignment that aligns with my background, but I wanted you to be aware of my situation given my background in the life sciences. If there are any other professionals you recommend reaching out to, or any advice you might have, I would be grateful. Likewise, if I can offer any recommendations to searches you're working on, I'm more than happy to see who I know that may be helpful. Okay, which one of those is relational in nature, and which one of those is transactional in nature? Which one would you be more inclined to respond to if you could only respond to one? I mean, again, we're all busy. There's only so many hours in the day. But and then how can you take those two real life? Those have come in with, I mean, almost verbatim within the last 24 hours. And then how can you apply that to use those applications in different situations? Right?
Yeah, I mean, as most people want to help, and they want to be helpful and be a mentor to young people, but they are also busy professionals, so they don't have the time to map out your career path for you. However, if there is a place that they can insert themselves, they're happy to do it. So, in that's a great example of that open-ended question that gets no response because it's too big for me to tackle. Okay, yes, I know that now you don't have a job, but I don't have an hour to sit down and try to figure out what path you might be interested in. However, if you've told me I'm already interested and here are a couple of the ideas of places that I'm interested. If you hear of something that comes up in those areas, please let me know. It's a very manageable question. And I think that's the thing is that and it's easy to be kind of self-centered during that whole situation. You've now lost your job. Your whole world's been rocked and you're trying to figure out what your next step is. But not everybody is feeling your pain. So you need to kind of break it down into little bite-sized bits for them to help you with versus trying to get them to tackle the entire situation for you.
And to your same point, right? The first one where they're just looking for something, either you have it or you don't have it. So it's a quick yes or no. Whereas the second one, they're actually trying to form a relationship with you and build something, which in the process helps, especially frankly, the recruiting world that's very competitive. It's hard to find the ones that you can really trust and rely upon. So forming the and I think it's the same thing true with candidates. I mean, I think the biggest mistake a candidate makes is talking to too many recruiters, and then their resume gets sent over to the same place more than once, and that's an automatic. We're nixing you from the process, because it shows that you're not committed. Versus really relying upon a couple that you trust.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So moving on to our next question. So Julie, I think many of us want to hear about what the move is to a startup company. You easily could have, leaving Warner, you easily could have, or not so easily, but you could have made the choice to stay in corporate America or another Fortune 500 type company. But you chose to move to a startup. So, both, can you tell us why you made that choice? And what that transition looked like, and what were some of the fears that you had, and how did you overcome them? So I know that's kind of a loaded question.
Well, because it presumes that I've overcome all of them, which is not necessarily the case. Because I think that by nature of even discussing a startup, it's high risk, high reward. So it's a difficult thing to decide to do. Corporate America is very safe. I say that it's also, it's like steering a cruise ship. It takes a really long time to see movement and change. Whereas in a startup, it's day to day and it moves very quickly. So there are benefits to each side. In the business that I was in, the business has changed. It was basically, programming distribution, so cable distribution. Well, as many of you, I'm sure, hear in the news, ESPN, Disney is at war with a cable distributor, and so that's what we were dealing with for many years. And that business has changed dramatically, and I had watched it change, and could see where it was no longer the business that I entered 20 years prior. And so there was one, kind of thought in my head that I don't know that this is where I want to be in another 20 years. And I've got plenty of kind of room on my runway still to go. And so I want to do something different. I also have the benefit of having a spouse who has a very steady job and steady benefits and things like that. So I am able to take that kind of risk. That's not necessarily for everyone if you don't have a little bit of a safety net, because in a startup business, there is no safety net. I mean, you are, like I mentioned, taking out the trash and running the company at the same time. So you've got to be able to kind of do a lot of things at once, multitask, and stomach the risk that comes with it. And it also, it's hard when, if I got a decline or, kind of had a bad day in corporate America, you go home at the end of the day and you can kind of disassociate from it. Now my identity is completely wrapped into everything that I'm doing. So it's a little bit harder to do that. So I think that I've been able to do that with, because I've got a few more years under my belt. And so I've seen some of that, but also because, I have some perspective on life through my family, but also through all the volunteerism and working, on other projects outside of work that have given me that kind of really valuable perspective. So it's not for everybody, but it is kind of an exciting and different thing to do, and really is making me stretch those kind of creative muscles that I didn't even think were still there, to be honest.
Don, anything else to add? I know that, you've probably come into a number of people in the life science world where there's a number of startups as well.
Yeah, we deal mostly with small to mid-sized firms at our firm. And just my personal experience, having worked for a corporation like Julie, Bank of America is pretty big company. And I found myself over the years working for progressively smaller and smaller companies until I started my own. So it's kind of funny. I mean, I just think about it, the downside, the upside of, the big corporation is that, you got virtually unlimited resources, and you've got all these departments and people that you can go to, and, obviously got a lot of colleagues and things like that. But, the upside that I see now is, the complete freedom and flexibility to do what you want. And yeah, it's a 7x24 environment. So that, there's a downside to take it, that broke, you fix it, the trash, you take it out, the buck stops with you, period. But what I've found to be true that I really love about the startup and the earlier stage environments is the learning really truly, and I promise you this is the case, it's exponential in the startup environment. I think anybody that's been even at a biotech startup will tell you that's also been at a big pharma company, you will learn more because you kind of have to. You learn more in a small company environment. It's just an exponential growth. So
we have to be not afraid to learn more, and to, hang up a call and then go online and Google what an acronym means, or, something that you've heard in the call that you're thinking, I have no idea what this is, but I'm going to find out. And next time I'll know. And it's humbling, but you're right. It does really make you learn every day, every hour you're learning something more, which is fun and exciting.
Agreed. So now when you're thinking about your career journeys, how would you say volunteering has played a role both in your movements, but also how you've evolved and grown within your careers? So Don, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. So so the way I like to think about this is most great people that I know are grateful, and grateful for a variety of parts of their lives and experiences that they've had. Everyone I've been in contact with at the CF Foundation, this really resonates. They all share this common thread in philosophy. So I journal daily, and if you don't, I recommend that you start. And one of the questions I answer for myself every day, and I do this, and I'm very specific. I do this with the name of a person. I say Julie or Harris or whoever I've helped that day. Or I answer it with the name of an organization like CFF. And the question is very simple. It's, who did I help today? And the spirit of the question is no quid pro quo. Okay, because I help people all day long, but I get something out of it. I get paid, or, so I want to be able to answer that question every single day. And I want to be able to answer that question with at least one person or group. And so I got nothing out of it. Nothing, zero. That makes me feel good. So you can imagine looking at that list over a 365-day annual period, and looking at that, reflecting back on that and going, boy, that makes me feel good about myself. It makes me feel that I'm living a worthwhile life and contributing to something besides myself. And so I think volunteering gives you not only the feeling associated with doing good and helping others, it also adds to your skill base. So I'm going to give you a quick example. I'm actually right now leading a security planning deployment for our congregation because of the rise in criminality and things like that. So I'm having to learn a whole litany of new terminology, and I never knew what a network video recorder was up until the police department visited our campus a couple of months ago. So again, exponential learning. But I served on the audit committee for our church, and I'd never been through an audit before. And quite frankly, I don't want to go through one again. I think some of these experiences help teach us maybe what we don't want to do in our careers, in our lives, but that's okay, But that was volunteer based. I didn't get paid for auditing our church's financial records, and I had to be trained how to do it. And I found it boring, to be honest. But it's another skill that I now have. I know how to conduct an audit. Whoopee! So there you go. I mean, volunteerism gives you new skills. So I encourage you to think out of the box about that and what it can give you, or what it might steer you maybe even away from.
Well, it does give you those new skills. And I know my role, even though I was on the, kind of leadership team, executive leadership, I still didn't get the opportunity to do many things in that role that I enjoy doing. And so I didn't get, a friend of mine used to joke, you didn't get a chance to kind of use your superpowers, because there were things I like to speak in public and, big public speaking. Yes, I would speak at meetings, but I didn't really have an opportunity to speak in front of large groups. But I do when I'm in my volunteer roles, because I'm leading a board or I'm leading an event. And so that was a great way for me to build those skills. It also gives you that chance to kind of work cross-functionally and collaboratively with people that you might not interact with otherwise. And that's a great skill to have, because it really is transferable into any role. I mean, any place you go, whether it's a big company or a small company, you have to work with other people, and you have to work with people who are different than you. And so the more experience you have at that, the better you become at doing that. And hey, you also get a chance, because of those volunteer leadership roles, to meet great individuals, great, executives from other companies, and showcase those leadership skills in front of them. That's what I was kind of mentioning before, is that, I had a client, a very important client, who was also involved with CF. Separately, he had a different connection than I did. And we both found ourselves involved with CF. And so we had a chance to connect on a different level. We were not talking business during that time. But then when we did talk business, when I was with him in a professional setting as the representative from Turner, and he was the representative from Comcast, he knew me in a different way than he knew anybody else around that table. And so if I said something, he knew that he could trust what I was saying, because we had already built that relationship of trust. And so there was just so much that I got out of that wasn't intentional. I mean, we just happened to find ourselves in the same place, but it gave me an opportunity to really kind of showcase that. And I think more than anything else, it's a perspective builder. Being involved with an organization like this, in particular, really helps you create some perspective about your life. We used to joke at Turner, because it was cable. So it was the little C, not the big C, meaning not cancer, right? It's not that big of a deal. If a deal falls through, yes, it's money, it's an issue, it's not life or death. When you are around CF families who are enduring what they're enduring every day, and these warriors who are living and fighting every single day for a better life. And you're raising money to then provide those, the medications and the modulators and all of those things to transform their life. That's bigger than anything else that we're doing. And so that tremendous perspective that it provides for you is what helps you to kind of dismiss the sales call that didn't go so well, or the interruption to your day that just caused an issue, and it's not that big of a deal. You can at least put that aside. And I think that's a really important part of what we get out of volunteering. That is it's not on the the job description for why you would volunteer, but it's one of those intrinsic benefits that you're getting by virtue of volunteering, especially with a cause like CF.
I would agree with all that, and I also think one of the key things is the volunteerism becomes in many ways a second job, just a job you don't get paid for, and you may be moving around from different companies, right, every 2 years, every 3 years, especially as you're beginning in your career, and you may deal with employers that may question, well, is this person going to stick around, right, if I hire them, right, or am I gonna, or is this, or are they just going to stay with me until they move to the next job? But if you're able to show that you've been volunteering with an organization for 5, 6, 7, 10 years, even again, if you were little kids, if you're if you're part of a CF family, that shows your commitment to an organization and shows the employer that if you're getting something out of it and feel like you're growing within that organization, that you're going to stick with them, right? And I also think too, the benefits of being in an organization like the CF Foundation. I'm part of an industry group. And the first time I really got involved, they said, you're going to be speaking in front of a group of 100 people. How do you feel about that? I said, well, for the CF Foundation, I'm speaking in groups of 500 people. So why would I be nervous? But they're used to dealing with, for lack of a better word, the bean counters that Dunn no longer wants to be part of, where, I was an ex-auditor sitting in a cube as my day job. And then my night job, I was, working with the young professional program, figuring out what's our next event we're doing. You couldn't have two different ends of the spectrum, but yet in so many ways, I got so much more out of that. And now, 15 years later, I'm able to now apply what I did then into now that I moved up within my career, be able to apply what I did when I was 25 as now at my current job. So, again, there's a longer standing to what we do, both to help and find the cure for CF, but also to the same point, making sure that you as a volunteer are also getting what you want out of it, because then, it's being a mutual benefit for both.
Yeah. Harris, I had a situation where I was eligible for a promotion, and I was being considered for a promotion at Turner, and that role, I would have been leading a much larger team. And I didn't really have experience. I'd only, managed 1 or 2 people, because the roles just weren't built that way. As you moved up, you managed larger and larger teams. And so the way that I could demonstrate that I could do it was by reflecting and kind of showcasing what I had done in the volunteer world, where I had managed large teams of volunteers, which arguably is much more difficult than managing employees because they don't work for you. So, but I could tell those stories and use those examples of, conflict resolution, and where I'd had to try to motivating a team of volunteers. Again, you don't have money to work with. You don't have any kind of extra perks. You've got to figure out what those other motivators are for them. And so all of those examples helped me paint the picture of how I had done it before and how I could do it again. And that I was experienced in that area, even though my professional resume didn't reflect that. So yes, I mean, you can find so many ways where your volunteer experience benefits you in life and your perspective, but also as you're growing your career as well.
a great example
Totally.
of translational value.
So we have about 10 minutes left for this session. So now I do want to open it up to questions from all of you. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat, or again, please use the raise hand feature and we'll call on you to ask a question live. So while you all are thinking of a question to ask, let me ask one that I asked in our pre-session, but I do think it's very relevant for today. And again, we're only at the getting up to bat here, so we recognize that my question is a somewhat difficult question and not totally a clear one, but for Don in the recruiting world, how do you see AI playing an effect?
Do we want to talk about specifically the whiteout technique? Because it's there's a lot going on in the AI world. I just went to a session I had mentioned in our pre-session here today with ChatGPT. Make sure and check your references. That's the lesson that I learned from some people that are far smarter than I am. But I think it can be, at the end of the day, I've used it for quite a few different things, but I think it can be used for if I'm a candidate, a job seeker. I think I can use it to, my resume pitted against a job description, potentially looking at those things, seeing where I might superimpose. There's also a program called jobscan.com that was kind of pre-chat GPT that'll actually take a job post and your resume, and you basically click the button and it helps you to polish your resume as it applies to the position in question. But one of the things that we were talking about in terms of the pregame was the idea of the whiteout technique, which is just simply a listing of keyword skills that might fall at, say, the bottom of your resume, and you just white out the font so that the computer on the other end picks up the keyword that's mentioned. So the example is, if I speak French, I might use the word merci to say thank you. Same meaning, but denotes the fact that I speak French, I guess. The idea being that you kind of, some people kind of, I guess, poo-poo the idea because, you're trying to trick the computer, trick the recruiter, or whatever. My opinion is, no, you're not, as long as you're telling the truth. As long as you have that skill set. I mean, I don't list things like Microsoft Word on my resume, although I use Microsoft Word daily, and I'm not a master of Microsoft Word, but I certainly know it well enough to do my job and most tasks. So I don't feel like I need to put that on my resume, but if I wanted to, I could put MS Word at the bottom, white it out, and then a computer would pick it. Somebody that was doing a keyword search for MS Word would actually pick that up. So that's kind of the spirit of that. Harris, does that answer what you were asking about?
Oh, that's great. That's great. And I'm excited to hear, in a couple of years from now, if what you've said holds true and how AI really evolves in your world.
Well, and I think you need to use it. Sorry, Harris, you need to use it as it's kind of intended, which is as a thought starter, not to rewrite for you or try to replace your voice, but if you're feeling stuck on a cover letter, I think that it can help you to come up with something that's a little bit catchier, let's say, in your subject line or in one part of the letter, but don't take it word for word. You wouldn't want to take anyone's content word for word. Just it's not yours. But if it does help you spur a little bit of creativity in what you're writing because you've hit a block, I think it's a good thing.
Great. So to that same end, how do you know when it's your time to look for your next opportunity? I feel like I talk to friends and they want to, they want to leave, but then they're like, oh my God, I have to update my resume. I don't feel like updating my resume. But it's like, is that the sign to know what that, that they should be looking at your next opportunity? Or are there other signs? And then to that same kind of vein, right? Is having too many jobs. I kind of alluded to it before, is having too many jobs. Is there a number where it's too many, right? I'd always been brought up to think that you have to stay in a job for at least a year, but is that even too short, or is it okay to leave a firm after 6 months? So those are kind of two questions in one.
I'll start, Dawn. I
Yeah.
think one of the reasons that you should be updating your resume is if you feel like you're stuck. I mean, if you feel like you've been passed over for a promotion or two and the opportunities just aren't there, don't allow yourself to get kind of lulled into complacency, because that's easy to do, and you won't be providing the value that you want to do, and so you won't be the next person on that promotion list. If you missed it one time and then you get kind of lulled into that, you won't be ready for it the next time. If it supercharged you to want to do more and to expand what you're doing so that you are prepared for the next one, then that's great, hang around. But also, if you just feel like the company is taking a turn in a direction that isn't right for you, you should be updating your resume. It's always good to have an updated resume. Now, I say that I was at a company for 22 years. I mean, I don't know that that's really the norm anymore. It was the norm at Turner Broadcasting. Most people that were there were lifers. So, I have my kind of preconceived notions about someone who comes and goes within a year. But anymore, that's more of the norm. Coming and going in a year is more of the norm than staying for 20 years. So, yeah, it's all part of the new changing landscape.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all right. So my view on that is, when should you look? Absolutely, what Julie said. To add on to that, I think about things like weakening corporate balance sheets. The industry trade winds are changing. I think about industry obsolescence. For instance, that might be a good time to. It may have nothing to do with your necessarily with your employer, but the industry's not going to be around in 10 years. It might be a good time to start looking. And the one that may be a little bit less obvious is you don't have to be looking. It's when a superior opportunity presents itself. Talk to the recruiter. And I know some of the employers and the hiring managers on the phone are going to hate what I'm about to say, but talk to the recruiter, talk to the hiring manager. You decide. Okay, Lou Adler, author of Hire with Your Head, says move if it's a 30% gain. I'm not talking about a 30% gain in compensation. It might be a 5 or 10% gain in compensation, but if it's that plus 20% in additional responsibilities, or what you get out of it on a holistic level, is a 30% return not worth your time listening to? I'll listen to that. Anyway, that's my opinion on that. In terms of the job hops, the job skips, earlier on in one's career, that's expected. Okay, so I think about the earlier on versus the later on aspect. The job change is just really more expected, I think, earlier on in one's career. The flip side of that is that if you're not with a firm for any length of time, how can you accomplish anything? So when you start to develop your professional career over time, you're measured on your accomplishments, right? What did you accomplish at Turner, Julie? What did Harris you accomplish at? So you're going to get questions like that from the interviewers, and if you're not there long enough to accomplish anything, I'd be almost more worried about that than the absolute length of time. If you accomplished a great deal in 2 years, so be it. If you can tell a great story and you've only been there 2 years, super.
Right.
But that's not easy to do in 6 months or a year, is it? So I think I'd be a little more focused on what you accomplished than how long you were there.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I agree with that. And that's a good point. I actually never really thought of it like that. So that's helpful. And I have one last question. I know we're at the top of the hour, but I do think it's a good way to end tonight, which is, can you tell us, one or two ways to make your resume stand out from the crowd? Both, and then you could tell us from ones that you've reviewed that you're kind of like, wow, also ones that maybe you've given advice on.
You go, it's like pink and scented, like Legally Blonde, or I mean, I think, what's frustrating for me when I'm asked to help someone with a resume is if they have a very narrow roles and responsibilities, and the resume speaks to that. I don't know that business, and so it doesn't make sense to me. But if you can really kind of highlight the transferable skills and those accomplishments in a way that someone who isn't in that industry will still understand what you've done, then the resume, I think, is something that you can send out broadly and feel like, people will give you good solid feedback on that.
Yeah, and just to dovetail on that, on Julie's point there, I mean, so practice the art of brevity would be, point number one. People say, does it need to be 1 page, 2 page? I don't care. I've seen really good resumes for scientists that might be 4 or 5 pages long. That's fine, but practice the art of brevity. There's 3 things. What did you do? Crystal clear. I need to understand what you did. Need to understand who you did it for, and make it easy on the reader. I know who GlaxoSmithKline is and Pfizer, right? I know who Turner Broadcasting System is, and I know who Bank of America is. And probably everybody on this call knows who all of those companies are. But I might not know who Joe's Biotech is. Put a link there. Put a sentence or so about the company. Small molecule drug development company that did XYZ. Okay, just something. Otherwise, what am I going to do? I'm going to have to go look it up, right? Make it easy on the reader. Then the final thing is, what did you accomplish? All 3 of those points ought to be crystal clear in the briefest format possible.
That's great. That's great. So I think that's a good way to end tonight's session. So I want to give a huge thanks to both Julie and Don for taking the time to prepare for today and for making this such an interesting and meaningful conversation. We're dropping their LinkedIn profile links in the chat here, so please feel free to connect with them there. And again, thank you to all of you for joining us tonight. I certainly found this session helpful, and I hope you all did too. We look forward to seeing you at our 3rd and final session for the year on December 7th from 7 to 8 p.m., which will be Business Etiquette Made Easy, Mastering the Art of Professionalism. So again, thank you all for joining us, and have a great evening.
Thanks, Harris.
Thanks, Harris. Thanks, Julie.